Hello everyone, I'm Dragon T, your host today. How everybody's going? You know how it is. You gotta reinvent yourself just to pay the bills, put food on the table, and try to have some kind of life in this economy. So that's what I'm doing. First things first, I want to make it clear that even though the ideas are mine and the words came from a real person, the voice and the avatar aren't. And damn, if I knew how to make a VTuber avatar, I'd totally be here looking like some hot manga guy. But this is what we've got for now. Honestly, I was in a hurry to talk about one specific topic, so we're just going to start like this. And just so we're clear, this show's basically going to be a mix of whatever comments or thoughts happen to pop into my head. This one's for the girlies. Valko isn't coming anymore. After all the waiting for the sixth love interest in Love in Deepspace, Infold just straight up dropped the Metal Wolf Boy on June 30th, saying they did it to address the dissatisfaction from the Miss Hunters. Man, when I saw that, I was literally about to leave the house and all I could think was, damn, what? Because you just don't expect something like that after all the hype and announcements they made. Dissatisfaction over what to deserve this? I honestly had no idea what was going on. At first, I even thought it was because his design just looked like a mix of the other guys. I don't know, you know? Raphael has always reminded me of an outgoing Luo Yunqi, and Caleb looks a lot like a young Yan Yiquan. So honestly, the least I was expecting was for the sixth love interest to have features more like Zhang Linghe or Hiyu. At the time, I was actually way more disappointed that apparently these guys don't know what a precise wish is, and now I'm not going to get my Mr. Darcy version of Zane. So Valko's appearance was the least of my problems. Well, you could say that was one of the reasons he got cancelled, but it definitely wasn't the only one. You could say Valko basically getting erased from existence was the result of a whole series of mistakes by the game's own developer, and all those screw-ups just kept piling up until the fans, especially the Chinese fanbase, got more and more fed up. And honestly, to me, the company seriously lacks a good PR team, and especially people who actually know how to handle a crisis. Because by doing, well, basically what they're doing, they're ending up fueling and are still fueling the conflict between the Chinese fan base and the international one. Instead of trying to calm things down or find some middle ground, they're just letting both sides clash while the situation keeps getting worse. I agree with the people saying Valko became the company's scapegoat for a crisis it created itself. I mean, I've watched plenty of Chinese productions get shoved into a drawer because an actor thought it'd be a great idea not to pay his taxes properly. Or because some single actor figured paying for the services of some fleurs de trottoir was somehow a smart career move. Or because a drama dared to show the bros being a little too close, and apparently according to a bunch of old guys making the rules, that might inspire improper behavior instead of helping boost the country's birth rate. So yeah, given how things are right now, I'm really not holding my breath for Valko to come back anytime soon. That said, this is absolutely a chance for international fans to make some noise and let their voices be heard. Because honestly, it's exhausting seeing Chinese companies chase the international market when it's time to make money. But the second it's time to actually listen to that audience or improve the product, suddenly we don't exist. And I'm saying all this as someone who genuinely likes and follows Chinese media, like games, dramas, and novels. I can even empathize with the fact that a lot of the arguments behind this situation come from the realities of that society. Even so, Valko is being cancelled largely over issues that are, at best, only tangentially related. At first, the dissatisfaction over adding a new love interest for the MC came from the fact that the other characters, especially Caleb and Silas, who were added later, still don't have as much content as the original three. The Little Wolf was supposed to launch with free content, while Big Brother and Crow Daddy both debuted with paid content. And adding a sixth character would mean the team would have to spend time making content for him instead of catching the others up. Now, supposedly, removing Valko frees up room for the developers to improve the quality of the other guys' content. But the question is, wouldn't it actually be more work to restructure the story so it no longer includes a character who, even if we hadn't officially met him yet, had already been part of the narrative all along? So the whole lack of commitment to the earlier character storylines really traces back to a mistake. The developer can say all they want that it was just a coincidence, but it was a pretty serious mistake. Personally, I think that's why Valko got removed. Not because they wanted to satisfy the fans, but because before you can make money off your players, you have to keep existing as a company. I mean, out of literally countless possible number combinations, how do you end up using the exact one that's associated with one of the worst crimes one group of human beings ever committed against another, and then brush it off by saying, well, stuff like that just happens in war? People in the West are pretty used to assuming it's just the local population being overly sensitive, mostly because they don't really know much history beyond their own backyard. But you can't forget that every society has subjects that hit a nerve. I mean, there are places that proudly call themselves champions of free speech, yet you can barely bring up the fact that there's another school tragedy there practically every day because the tools used to carry out those tragedies are sold in places as ordinary as supermarkets. There are topics that people should be talking about so they can actually be addressed, but they aren't because they're painful. And it's the same over there. The first time I realized just how important this issue is to them was when actor Jung Zehan got canceled back when Word of Honor was a huge hit. And no, he wasn't canceled just for starring in what was basically a boys' love drama disguised as they're just really close bros. It was because photos surfaced of him in Japan near a shrine that's associated with Japanese militarism. I remember people saying at the time that the shrine also honored two men who were responsible for ordering all kinds of atrocities against humanity and promoting ideas of racial superiority. Jung Zehan said he didn't know the history of the place, but that didn't really matter. He was also condemned for his ignorance and accused of being unpatriotic. Living on the other side of the world, I could have easily thought, wow, he got canceled over that? But once you learn what actually happened over there during World War II, man, it's hard to blame people for being outraged that a supposedly random number ended up referencing Unit 731. So to me, that's the most serious part of this whole situation, because it's the one that could actually put the game's future at risk. The relationship between China and Japan hasn't been good for a long time, for a whole bunch of reasons. And for anyone who hasn't been following the news, things have been getting tense again with Japan's push to rearm, something that's controversial precisely because of its actions during World War II. If you watch K-dramas, you've probably come across the topic of the comfort women at some point. Another crime against humanity that the Japanese government still refuses to formally apologize for, arguing that it was simply an unfortunate consequence of war. All of these are extremely sensitive issues, so having something like this show up in a game now is a pretty major blunder. Does it have anything to do with Valko? No, not directly, but it's kind of like The Sims. The little negative moodlets just keep stacking on top of the frustration the fans already had. I saw some girlies saying that Chinese fans were implying Valko came across as bi, that he was made for the international audience, and that he was too dark. Now, I saw people interpret that last part in two different ways. Some thought they meant his skin tone, while others took it to mean he was a little too gloomy or brooding. From what I saw browsing Weibo though, the complaints weren't always about the character himself. A lot of them were more along the lines of the game becoming less Chinese. People brought up things like events tied to Chinese national holidays getting different names in the English version, or they kept emphasizing that this was a Chinese game, almost like it was meant only for them. Those comments were showing up under posts about Valko. So there definitely is this idea that he was created to appeal to the international market. Now, as for changing the holiday names, that was the developer's decision. Personally, I wouldn't have minded at all if the events had just kept their original Chinese names. Another issue people brought up was the idea that the game was supposedly romanticizing a stalker who breaks into the homes of girls living alone, lies down in their beds. The official statement said it was meant to promote the new housing system, and I understand they were both supposed to launch together. But I mean, if we're talking about both the lore and the meta, the big bad wolf also broke into Grandma's house and ate the old lady, so a good marketing and PR team should be thinking about how the message is going to come across. Because if a lot of people are taking it in a way that makes them uncomfortable, then you probably didn't communicate your intent clearly enough. Apparently, the English localization handled that said line a lot better with, "And what's so bad about wolves being at the door?" instead of the Chinese version, "What's wrong with bringing a wolf into your home?" The other part of this whole controversy is about the cooking system. Valko has a line that says, at least in the Chinese version, I didn't see it in English, "Never take a bath in a cooking pot." Man, at first I thought people were talking about a completely different case, and obviously, according to the developer, it has nothing to do with any real crime. But when I started looking into it, Man, it's honestly kind of shocking how many criminal cases in China involve bodies being cooked to get rid of the evidence. So it's really not surprising that fans got triggered by that line. The more direct comparison, though, was to a case from 2024 in Huinan in Shaanxi province, where a husband forced his wife into a giant soup pot. Well, you can probably figure out the rest. Now, it wasn't just the fans who got this whole thing moving. Newspapers like Guangming Daily and China Women's News got involved too. But at this point, what you're seeing is the original argument kind of getting watered down into just, we don't want Valko, period. Especially from the Baling Xiaojie, or as people call them, the misses of bullying. At the same time, more and more Chinese fans are starting to speak up because they want the character back. From everything I've seen so far, though, there still hasn't actually been any action from the government. So far, everything that's happened has been the company's own decision. So yeah, money definitely talks. And that's it for today. Thanks so much to everyone who stuck around and listened to this first episode. Don't forget to leave a like, hype it up, and subscribe.